Have you seen his penis?
A young man in a dark suit threw my hand through the window. A policeman stared at the blood netting like a widow's veil around his face and hair. An elderly man in a transparent plastic raincoat was pulling uneasily at the passenger door behind my head, as if frightened that the car might throw a powerful electric charge into his thin hand. The third, carrying a young woman doctor and her husband, I struck head-on. Had she any notion of the man, or woman, with whom her next sex act would take place? The young American assistant producer was remonstrating with the dark-haired man in a leather jacket, trying to take a camera away from him. I moved her slowly against me, pressing the shaft of my penis against her clitoris. Behind the unwashed glass of the showroom was a fiberglass replica of a 1930s Brooklands racer, faded bunting stuffed into the seat. After a near collision at a traffic intersection, semen jolts across a cracked speedometer dial. Helen Remington turned from the crashed convertible. I called Catherine to the veranda and pointed to a minor collision on the southern access road of the motorway. Beside him on the sofa, a sharp-faced young woman was preparing another joint, as she rolled a small piece of resin in a twist of silver foil. She sat in the damaged car like a deity occupying a shrine readied for her in the blood of a minor member of her congregation. The third, carrying a young woman doctor and her husband, I struck head-on. The car swept toward. I think of the absurd crashes of neurasthenic housewives returning from their VD clinics, hitting parked cars in suburban high streets. Once we were the first to reach the crashed car of an injured woman driver. For Vaughn, the car crash. By coincidence, her small sports car had collided with an airline bus at the entry to the airport underpass not far from the site of my own accident. Chapter 1. Vaughn died yesterday in his last car crash. Looking closely at this silent terrain, I realized that the entire zone which defined the landscape of my life was now bounded by a continuous artificial horizon, formed by the raised parapets and embankments of the motorways and their access roads and interchanges. She sat down beside me, casting a brisk eye over my unshaven face and fretting hands. He was wearing the same stale jeans he had unrolled around his hard buttocks during his sex act as I drove the car. I think of the crashes of excited schizophrenics colliding. By coincidence, her small sports car had collided with an airline bus at the entry to the airport underpass not far from the site of my own accident. Vaughn brought a brass lighter out of his hip pocket. I looked down at her blonde hair that covered her face, at her hips kicking as she carried herself towards her orgasm. The third, carrying a young woman doctor and her husband, I struck head-on. Above us, on the crest of the ascent lane, two policemen steered the traffic stream from the near side curb,